Hi, this is Paula, Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. Several years ago on the internet, somebody came to my attention, and his name is Ken Kish, and we've been planning to do a show about his story for several years now because I've longed to get into this topic properly of human sexuality and how we can understand human sexuality in such a way that we can advance individually in our local communities and eventually in our global community. So I'm going to welcome our guest, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and you came up from?
I came up from Hickory, North Carolina.
And what are you thinking of your time here in New York?
I've been to New York a couple of times, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing so much of sightseeing because I've already done that before.
Right.
But I'm just enjoying your company and
the company of the other Access family, public
yes,
Access family.
Yes, it's been been very enlightening experience.
One of the guests that you brought the other day that we taped, he was so dramatic when I was videotaping him in front of the John Jay Criminal Justice Complex. He points out on one hand we have Little Manhattan Neighborhood Network that's probably the citadel of free speech for the country. It's one of the most active public access channels. But the building dwarfs in comparison to this John Jay Criminal Justice Complex. And he said, on one hand we have free speech, and on the other side of the street, the right to remain silent. So thank you for the guests that you brought. And those shows will be playing often on my show. How would you like to start? You said you had an analogy to...
Well, I think that the best way to start is I've written a book called Despised Things.
Let me... Oh, you want to hold it and maybe zoom in on Ken's book here?
There we go.
Oh, we have to put this one. This
okay.
one. Yeah, that's the camera.
And Despised Things, actually I became inspired to write when I found myself, what this book here is about is how I found myself on the sex offender registry and the events that led up to that. So that's what this particular book is about.
And there's a quote that Despised Things comes from. You want to do that later?
We'll do that later.
Okay, let's not forget. Remind us in the control room about the title.
What occurred was when the events that surrounded my situation that landed me on the registry occurred, I became inspired to write, and so I began writing, and I write the story. But as I was writing my story, then I started having these incredible spiritual experiences that began to occur, and beyond what I ever thought I could imagine. I'm talking about spiritual experiences where I moved, and spirit came to me and moved me into other dimensions. Spirit came to me and began to show me universal secrets on many levels. And we'll get into some of that. But when I wrote, and I turned my book in to many different publishers and got picked up by a particular publishing company, they reviewed the book, and my editor said, well, you've written so much that we can't put it all in this one book, that there will have to be a second book. So this particular book here, Despised Things, will really it just leads up to the event before the spiritual aspects began to occur, the experiences which we're going to talk about today. So really you'd almost have to get this book to read the story to kind of figure out why, what would lead to these spiritual experiences. And the best way to explain it would be to say kind of like what we understand John the Revelator went through. He was a man that was tarred and feathered and thrown overboard, and he drifted lost at sea and ended up on an island, deserted. And
I didn't know he was tarred and feathered.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was banished from society and exiled. And during this time of his being banished from society and his persecution, this is when Spirit came and showed him his visions. This is what we know of history anyway. So I kind of relate it to that because I was going through a banishment, an exilement from society because of my landing on the registry, the sex offender registry. And someone had once asked, well, what would cause these spiritual experiences to occur, that's these profound experiences, and why do I think that they happened? And the best way to really explain it is, and this is what this book reveals, is if you take some of the most sinister people, cruel people with the cruelest intentions, and they attack another human being who has been kind to them, who has been generous to them, who's been loving and giving and selfless to them for many, many years, and because of greed and because of just their cruel nature, they turn on this friend and do some of the most manipulative, deceitful, cruel things that you could do to another human being.
And yet hide their actions to look good in the eyes of their
turn
fellow
things
man.
around in such a right, exactly, and some of the most wicked would be the best way to describe it. Turn things around in such a wicked way to make them look good, and the person who has been good to them look bad. Turn things around when you take the very extreme of the bad to the extreme of the good, and you do some of the most extreme cruel things to them. This is what I say, then Spirit has a way of stepping in and getting involved with that person's life, and has a way of showing them things in a way to help to lift them up, bring them some upliftment in their life, so that they're not, because this thing took me to a point of suicide attempts, and being Baker acted and put in the hospital, and so it really got really severe. And this book leads up to that point, and then the spiritual events took place from after that, and that will be in book 2.
I think what really drove home to me the plight of those who are on the sex offender registry is when Ken, who's staying with me and Joe in Gramercy Park, we were outside. Joe goes down there to have a smoke now and then. I wish it was less often, but so we're sitting outside the steps, and Ken is looking around at the building, and the Gramercy Park's nice. You've got that iron grating, and he goes, "You said, what's their policy about sex offenders on the registry?" And I thought, oh my goodness, that to have this haunting you all the time.
Yeah.
We knew you to be one of the most pleasant guests we've had.
Exactly, and it's something that most people don't care. They feel that if you're on the registry, and we did another show on that, and we probably don't need to go into those aspects today, but
the great details about the recidivism is next to nothing.
Yes.
The suffering and who you're protecting really is practically non-existent.
But Spirit came in and did showed me some things, and one of the things that the best way for me to describe one of these experiences, if you'd like me to go into that at this point, is
you wanted the ant analogy?
Yes, it's a parable I created,
yeah.
And a parable is something that is an earthly story that has a heavenly meaning. It's a way for you to be able to understand things in the spiritual world by relating it to something in the physical world. And the best way for me to do that is an ant parable that I've come up with, an ant analogy. And that is this: if you were to imagine that you were standing over an ant hill, and maybe you and a few friends were standing over an ant hill, and you were studying these ants for quite some time, and you would get to know their mannerisms, and that some of the ants are bringing in food, and some are building the home, and some are guarding fighting off the intruders. And you understand there's this queen ant below, and everything begins and ends with the queen ant, and you understand their world. And although you understand their world and you're completely aware of them, they are yet oblivious to you in your existence. And as close as you get to them, they still are unaware that you are there, or unaware that you are aware of them.
They don't know they're being watched.
They don't know. They just keep doing their busy thing, and all things that are important to them are right there in their world, and nothing exists outside that world to them. So now imagine that you were able to maybe reach down and pick up one of those ants, and you were able to take the ant, and you were able to merge your consciousness with its consciousness, and its consciousness was able to merge with yours. It would become enlightened to many, many things beyond it ever could imagine. It would see the world beyond its own. The world's beyond its own. It would see the people. It would understand the humans now. It would become aware of the sky and what that means, and the clouds and the sun, and it would just be completely blown away. Then there's this thing called space and the moon and the stars and the universe, and it would just be completely blown away by anything that it could possibly ever imagine. And that analogy would be perfect for me because I've had that experience where I have been lifted and I have merged consciousness with a higher level of consciousness, and I experienced consciousness at that conscious level and became enlightened to many things going on beyond what we understand at this level of reality.
So out of the depths of your despair, you got a higher perspective, to say the least.
Exactly.
And you began to see all your suffering and travails in that light.
Yes. One of the things that when I merged with this higher level of consciousness, one of the things that I began to understand is the spirit world and how it really works. And to really understand the spirit world is to understand that spirit and frequency are the same thing. Many people don't really understand that, but when you start to think about it, that to say you have a spirit is to say you have a frequency. To say I have a spirit is to say I have a frequency, and they are the same thing. And you've heard or may have read or have the understanding or been taught that there are angels among us. There are legions of angels among us, and we can't even conceive of how that would exist. But if you start to think in terms of frequency, and frequency is consciousness, and all things are actually frequency. Spirit's frequency, consciousness is frequency, the love vibration is a frequency, fear is a frequency, all things are frequency. And the entire universe operates off of frequency. The entire universe is made up of frequency.
Right.
This is how the universe works.
Right, and there's laws and principles.
Sure, the laws of attraction, and frequency has a vibration. So the love vibration is a higher vibration. The fear vibration is one of the lowest vibrations, and there's all the frequencies and vibrations in between.
Right.
So when you think of angels and legions of angels among us, when you start to think of frequencies, you might say, well, how many frequencies do you think are in this room? And you could say, well, there's an endless amount of frequencies that could be in this room. Well, to say that is to say there's an endless amount of spiritual entities that could be in this room, or an endless amount of consciousness, conscious levels. Dimensions are frequencies of dimensions. So when I start to understand these things, then it helps you to understand many other things. Things start to get connected.
Right.
And one of the things, when I merged with this higher spiritual being, it all began with a deja vu. Everybody's had deja vu. You had deja vu. And I started having deja vu, and one day I had about 8 deja vu. And each time I had a deja vu...
Deja vu means that we've been here before.
You feel like you've had this feeling you've been here before. And every time I would have one, I'd have one, and then a few hours later I'd have another one. And every time I would have one, I'd feel myself going somewhere.
Right.
Into another dimension.
Right.
And then I would come back. And about the 5th or 6th one, I was kind of moving about my house, and then I would be maybe moving from one room to the next, but I would move to also spiritually, as I would have a deja vu, I would move into another dimension, come back from that dimension, and kind of be like, I was just somewhere, but you really kind of just came back.
Would it happen when you actually moved from one room to another with your physical body? Then you would have this shift?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, I just was just giving an example.
It's just when you say it, it reminds me of Saint Teresa talking about the mansions when she writes her exalted spiritual experiences, which was really something that she had to say to her confessor because they were probably keeping an eye on her at the Catholic Church. But it's very beautiful passages about her unions with God. Something really full-bodied and exalted and just supremely like the purpose of life is to know something great, to merge with something great, to be part of great love.
One of the things that the feeling that you get when you move into these other realms, these other realities, these other dimensions, or the spirit world, is when you come back from them, this place here seems oppressed. It seems heavy. You feel less alive here. Actually, when you go into these other dimensions and you come back, spiritually you move. Your physical body stays here, but spiritually you move into the other dimensions and you experience other friends you may have in those dimensions, other entities that you know, and you correspond with them. But when you come back to this reality, this three-dimensional reality, this physical body, you begin to understand how your 5 senses lock reality in. So we can't really imagine how reality exists outside of these five senses we have, but the truth of the matter is they lock our reality in, and there's so much more going out past it. But when you come back to this physical body from the spiritual planes, you feel less alive. And I think a lot of the reason is because in the spirit world, in the other dimensions, in the heavens, there are no laws. There is nothing there that you cannot do. And in the same way, there is nothing there that's expected of you.
You're unlimited, huh?
You're unlimited. And there you're free. I mean, real freedom. There's nothing there you're expected to do, nothing there that you cannot do. And when you come back here, excuse me, you come into a world of what? You come into a world of law. You come into a world of here's what you can't do, and here's what you can't do, here's what you can do, and here's this regulation, here's this law. So you have all that on you. When you come back here, you're like, you feel that oppression, you feel that weight of this place. So you don't feel that freedom, and you lose that, and you feel like you're in prison when you're here. You come back to here, you feel like you've been in prison, you went out for a while, experienced some real freedom, and then when you come back to this world, you feel like you're going back to jail. Some of the information that was given to me when I met up with this higher spiritual being who communicated to me through light, telepathically through light, and in the spirit world, light is information, that this planet had undergone some 200, 300,000 years ago some war in space among the gods, actually. And these gods come from what we refer to as the gods in the Old Testament. Now, among the Christians, the gods, there's just one true God, and therefore the gods in the Old Testament, Yahweh, Jehovah, Elohim, or maybe Allah for some others, they are just one God, just different names. But the truth of the reality is, with this information I received, that these entities, these Yahweh and Jehovah, Elohim, they are not associated with the original planners of Earth, and that they've actually come in and they've tricked the human species into believing that they are God, if they're hocus pocus and they're magic, because humans are so easily fooled. And part of what they've done is they've altered the human's body.
For those who don't believe in God, I would say it's more this type of flow that you call frequency, so that we can link up with something more than social mediocrity. And like you say later on in your story, for very petty reasons, great suffering was brought upon you for people to achieve not that much. And again, in contentious business, when you've got two parties that are warring and they need a judge to decide, it's similar to a sexual union where you don't want one party to be dominated by the other, because eventually the whole game is over. So that there's principles, and that even in the way our body is built, ancient wisdom has understood the importance of being made in the image of God, and that we come in male and female forms. And I was wanting the purpose of this show to show the relationship between sex and spirituality.
Well, one of the ant parable, the emerging of consciousness, was one experience, but I've had other experiences, and one of the other experiences was related to sexuality, and I was showing that human sexuality has been misunderstood, and that aside from procreation and orgasm, sexuality connects you with the frequency of ecstasy, which connects you back to your divine source and to information. When two people are making love, they're electromagnetically bonding, which creates a rocket ship-like effect that can propel you into other systems of reality. And this has been one of the best kept secrets upon the planet. And the reason God created man in his likeness and in his image, and it talks about we created man in our image. So there was these gods that came in and altered the human body and altered the DNA structure. And what they had done is they unplugged the human species. And sexuality was one of the things that they unplugged. And if you don't understand, if they can unplug you from sexuality and discovering that you can ride the frequency of ecstasy into other dimensions and get information and become enlightened, through the sexual experience,
Right.
if they can keep you away from that and make sex dirty and ugly and bad, and it should be done this way through the teachings. If you look through the Bible and the Old Testament, everything's law and do it this way and don't do it that way. Marriage and homosexuality is wrong, but now you begin to understand that these are these who are those who are lower vibrators. These are low vibrating energies in the universe who feed off suffering. They don't feed off of love. And as long as this planet continues to vibrate at a low frequency of suffering and fear, and as long as they can trick us and keep us fighting and imprisoning and jailing and keep us at war and hating and feuding, especially through our religious understandings and our religious beliefs, many of our wars are fought over that, then they can continue to sustain themselves on this planet as long as we are creating fear and chaos and suffering. If we don't start identifying what's really going on behind the scenes, if we continue this idea of punishment, this idea of apprehend, this idea of, and if people don't wake up and see that these court systems it's just a big business, and they're making money off of people. If we don't, we have been told that, oh, the criminals in the world are the reasons what's wrong with the world, and we have preachers up in there pointing their fingers that the homosexuals are the reasons. This is the real problem with the world. The real problem with the world are people judging people. Mm-hmm. Unless we are capable, unless a person or a society, we can learn to move past judgment and understand that we all come from different places. We need to learn to move past judgment. If we can't get to that position, then we're in trouble. As long as we feel the need that we need to constantly judge people, then we're going to constantly stay stuck in this reality that we're in.
There is a value to a tradition. For example, you're talking about the limitations of our average religious understanding. In this case, activating the Taoist points of love, this Mantak Chia was the one that kind of outraged his tradition because he started to bring out the ancient and the hidden techniques. And in your story, there was a woman who, I don't know if you want to describe her here on, but she had great sexual allure, and yet she so misused it. You would kind of fear that maybe knowledge of how to get more sexual power and more energy might not be appropriate for all people, or there should be some preparedness, some maturity. And they've often said, masters, in looking for disciples or teachers, because that's what you desire when you have a great gift. You want to hand it on to the next generation so that society advances. But you want to hand it on to who will serve people, not who will harm people. And sexuality should be to serve.
And I agree with that. I think, though, what happens is, because this planet has been taken over by these gods, that all of us come from somewhere. This is not our first time here. Not only is it not our first time here, but we also exist in other forms simultaneously. So many of us come from somewhere for experiences. And so some of us come from a lower level of vibration in the universe. Some of our spiritual heritage is not of a higher vibration. And we come here for maybe to evolve ourselves, because in the astral planes, in the spiritual world, it's a little more difficult to evolve yourself. But if you think about it, you come into the body, into this world, you can evolve yourself more rapidly, because you can experience all these emotions. You can come into the body. In the spiritual world, it's hard to experience suffering if you are one of the sufferers. But if you come into the body, you can have children, you can experience love, you can experience kindness, and then you can experience what it's like to have someone hurt you, and that helps evolve you. So when you pass on, you go back, you say, well, here's all these experiences I've had, and I've been suffered by this way, and that helps you become a more evolved spiritual energy or entity. So when you go back, you've evolved yourself a little better than before you came here, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it makes sense. When you say you experience somebody being towards you, what about the other hand? If you've experienced cruelty, how would you think that progress and evolution would say love is better, including is better? that if you're a wealthy person, wouldn't you rather be wealthy because you're participating in a society where everyone's included, and your greater wealth is because you were actually better at serving as opposed to enslaving? Can you address that in terms of your understanding of love?
Well, I would address it as in there's a certain amount of wisdom that comes with suffering. People who live a life on top never understand what it's like to be on the bottom, of course. So if you were, I've used this before too, if you were to go into battle and you had two generals, and one general is a general because he's just worked his way up through the ranks, through the academy or through schooling or whatnot, but not in the battlefield. And you have another general who's worked his way up by being in the battlefield, who's been shot at, he's been down in the trenches with his guys and with the men, and he understands that level of suffering, that level of fear, that level of brutality.
Right.
And if you were to go into war,
and he'd want to protect his men from that, right?
Sure. And if you had to go into war with one of these two generals, which one would you choose? You would want to choose the one who's been through it, who understands it, and knows how to go through it and get out of it. In the same way, I would equate that to we would choose to come into this world to experience suffering. Some of us, now I can't say everyone, but some of us would come into this world to choose suffering. We have this idea and this concept that someone who victims, we have this concept that someone's a victim. So if you have a victim, then you got to have a criminal. If you have a criminal, then you have profitability. Is really what's going on. But we have to, we have been.
Excuse me, that's what's going on. So what you mean about those at the top of the heap who don't know the suffering of those below? There's a lot of profitability to the sex offender registry and people benefiting from it in many ways that they may not even realize. I'm going to be doing shows talking about what socially responsible investing really means. They won't have the total experience of life. They maybe benefit by being rich, but if they don't know where their money's coming from, they're not really having the full experience of being a human being. It's not that you want to choose suffering, it's that you want to experience all the love that there is and all the potential and possibility.
Yeah, if you live a life on top and stay on top, then you really haven't evolved yourself much.
But so many people would be afraid to kind of reach out to the homeless or the,
I would say that's true.
Because you think they might get cooties or
well, there's some that do, and there's those that do. I think it all really relies on to where you're from. You're from. Some of us come from a very high place in the universe. Our spiritual anchoring is from a very exalted place, and we just choose to come into the body and experience different things for what reasons that we may not understand here, but we'll understand better when we go back. But we have someone who's killed in a tragic way, and we make them victim. And a whole nother way that we've been manipulated away from discovering truth is another idea is that instead of crying and mourning over the way someone has passed away, that maybe another idea is to honor them, because they chose to come into this body. Now, from this level of understanding, we can understand a child who has been savagely murdered, that they would choose that. Of course they wouldn't at this level of understanding, but if they've come from somewhere that's a higher level of understanding, they may say, well, I want to have this experience so that it will help me move through a layer of density or help me become more evolved. So they would come into the body just to experience this, and instead of us turning them victim, maybe we can, another idea is to start saying, let's honor them, honor their choice. They've selected to come to the world and have this experience, that when they go back, it helps them to go through their layer of density, to help them become a more evolved being. Right.
So in other words, to kind of reserve judgment long enough to say right away to greater understanding of the situation. I think people should definitely read Ken's book, but in a nutshell, for people who are probably all on the edge of the seat wondering what crime did Ken commit that would put him on the sex offender registry, there was a boy who looked to be older than he was, and was sort of set up as bait because they knew that as a gay guy, you were attracted to nice-looking men. And in truth, though, this poor boy was being used in one case by a lady who had 30 sex partners,
yes.
and was the one that appears to be getting off this scot-free, and sets things up, and you lose your entire business, and lawyers make money, and
here's the thing. This one particular the boy about that if anything that had occurred between us would have been in the state in which I live now, North Carolina, it wouldn't have been a crime. But because it happened in the state of Florida, it becomes a crime. So even amongst our own laws, we don't really have any, stability. Some people fall in the registry because of your public urination.
I know.
We don't really even begin to open our eyes to some of the practicalities of some of the insanity of it all. It's right. Some people are on the registry that if they only lived in another state, they wouldn't be on the registry.
Right, and including in one state where you can get married at 16, and you go to another state, bang, your wife puts you on the registry.
That has happened. That a couple had gotten married within the law in one state, moved to another state, but because it wasn't within the law, he became arrested and fell on the registry, and they're still married and having children.
Romeo and Juliet would be on the sex offender registry. I mean, one of our greatest love stories. So, you're here to set the record straight.
Well, I'm here to just, I don't know that I'm here to set the record straight. I'm here just to share my experiences and the light that's been given to me. And people can do what they want with it. They can help them become better informed. They can receive it, they can reject it. I mean, not everyone's going to receive it. Some people can't get past the fact that you fell on the registry, and they just can't get past that, and they just want to attack you, and that's all they want to do.
I know.
And the first will be last, the last will be first. If they choose not to become more evolved, they choose not to listen to the story, they choose not to allow that light in, then that's their choice. If they, some people are just are mean-spirited people, they're cruel people. That's just who they are.
Or they want someone to dump on. We all know about scapegoatism.
Yes, that's true.
It's an easy one to.
They don't want to look at their own selves, so they want to point the finger at someone else and keep their attention off of them, and that goes on too.
But I think in general that is the problem of government. When you want, rather than be generous yourself or look into something yourself, you think, well, something else should take care of that. And talk about politicians who go along with legislation that experience would show makes no sense.
A lot of times when politicians go along with legislation, and especially among the sex offender registry, they're going to do everything, they're going to make decisions that's going to help them get a better vote, help them get more votes.
Just because people are superficial.
Just because people don't understand, and they're just going to make, they're going to say, I support this, and so people are going to give them the vote. And there's nothing. Can you imagine a politician saying, I think we need to take some of the rules out of the sex offender registry that's gone too far?
Your story is so emotional. It is dramatic. It should be known. For absolute sure, we should look into all areas of social prejudice and so on. But look deeply into the legality of whether a sex offender registry should be registered through this type of corporation, and really, what are their motives? I'm suggesting their motives are ulterior for profit, and it's not at all about protecting, say, children. Can you talk about whether you think we even need a registry at all, or what you would think would be the solution to protect the vulnerable? Because I started the show off saying that the vulnerable is the only purpose of government, the protection.
We have allowed ourselves to come to a point as a society so far into hate and so far into greed, and we've allowed ourselves as a society to become to where we are that we don't know how to deal with anything other than punishment. With Prime Creator and with His essence, which consists of love and tolerance and meekness and humbleness and mercy. These are the things, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, the will is love, mercy, understanding, patience, and tolerance. Where
kindness
and selflessness, where in our society we accept justice and no justification and punishment and apprehend and lock up. And these are the type of things. Instead of having mercy, we have judgment. Instead of having understanding, we have prosecution.
Right.
Instead of having patience, tolerance, we have zero tolerance.
That's why I'm saying that when people don't trust their courts or trust their contracts or trust their fellow man, then it's all this quick, take whatever you can as quick as you can and hide it. You know, instead of investing and sharing and growing and including others.
Yeah, we've come to a point that's why I say it's going to take a shift in consciousness for the planet, for us to move away from the way this planet has been vibrating off the same frequency for eons because of what's happened in space over a long time ago. And the only way we're going to move off this frequency is if we shift our consciousness to a higher level of understanding. As long as we continue in the way that we are, you can't even imagine somebody saying, okay, well, let's just let everybody out of the prisons and jails and we'll just change everything. It wouldn't even work because we're so deep into it. It wouldn't even work. We've dumbed down our children. We've dumbed down the next generation. We tell them that, maybe not every individual, but in large respect, you can't do it. This is how you do it. We try to control the next generation and tell them how they need to run things instead of just turning things over to them and let them take what we give them and say, now you go with it, and then you turn that over to your children, and it's evolved the planet.
The way it's going right now, because law isn't practiced and judges are looking the other way, is we're handing on to the future generation enormous debt and slavery. I mean, talk about sexual spirituality as liberating.
Well, the love experience has nothing to do with relationships, whether they be heterosexual or homosexual. It has to do with two human beings that bring pleasure to one another in a way that can open frequencies of consciousness. Love is the essence that's to be created in all relationships. And if you love someone, it doesn't matter what the composition of your density is, young or old, black or white, black on white, male on male. It doesn't matter what your composition is, because the love connection is a gift. Mm-hmm. And what matters is that love vibration between two twin flame counterparts and how that love can be explored. And one of the things that had occurred for me is that through the sexual experience, I was able to, and it just occurred, it wasn't something I was looking for, but like I say, in this time of being banished from society and exilement and over a sex act, and here comes Spirit showing me something about sex that you can actually hear and considered one of the most vile in society, but yet I'm getting some of the most spiritual enlightenment on sexuality, and that you can use sexuality as a way to move into the spirit world.
So from the depths of your despair, what was your revelation?
Well, when you're going through, in your depths of despair, you're still in despair. You just receive light.
It doesn't just go away.
It doesn't just go away. If I cut my hand with a paper cut, I could be poor today and suffering financial difficulties and hit the lottery and be rich tomorrow and have all the wealth, but that paper cut is not going to heal any faster. It's going to take its time to heal.
Very good point.
So the paper cut's still going to be there, and the pain associated with that's going to continue to be there. So it takes time for any healing to occur with me. And so when I would have these experiences, I was still going through a lot of hurt and suffering and pain, and even though I was receiving enlightenment and understanding and why things are the way they are, how everything is backwards, and how these gods keep this planet backwards and keep humans in a direction that keeps them from discovering the truth of the matter. And if they can keep you involved in religion, and if you have a sexual experience and move into another dimension, they'll just say, well, that's sex magic, and they demonize it. Mm-hmm. But that's what these gods want you to think, so you don't discover the truth of the matter.
But isn't magic a good word? I like the word magic. They said it was a magical evening, or in some ways,
absolutely.
When spring comes and you see the flowers, it's magical. It's something beyond your control. I don't actually know what the definition is. I should look it up. I'm spending so much time with Black's Law Dictionary, I haven't thought of these other terms. What do you think prevents most of society from embracing this? Where is the appetite for evolution, for union, for love? We see in young people. I mean, I remember when I was 14 and my body was developing and I was having sexual thoughts, I longed for a union. I longed for knowledge. I still do. I always want to know more, experience more, not for greediness' sake, but just because it seems as though it's a great, great gift to have a human body and to be alive.
Well, you stop and think about it. Here, things are so messed up with the human species. We have sexuality that we've demonized, and it can't be done this way, and you shouldn't do it that way, and this is bad, and this is wrong, and all the different limitations that we put on something that is so natural, and one of our greatest pleasures that are free.
I know.
And yet, we can let our children go to movies where they murder, and they kill, and they swear, and they use, have horrible intentions to another human being. And they play video games where they're murdering and they're killing, and the intention in the video game toward another digital entity is to murder and to kill and to maim and blood and gut. This is not natural. But we've got things so backwards that which is natural to us we've demonized, and that which is not natural we glorify.
Right, right.
And we can't even be, it's not hidden from us, it's right there in front of us, and all we have to do is just begin to allow yourself to open up to it, and it will come to you. Seek, ask, and knock.
Right.
But seek, ask, and knock all things in all areas. If you seek and ask and knock within a particular belief system or a religious structure, then if those systems are founded on lies, then you're not going to find truth there.
Right, and you want to find truth. Sometimes it's been claimed that those who are in charge of established institutions, or now practically everything's a corporation, even churches, feel threatened by a real voice and a real experience. Like if Jesus said, "Greater things you shall do," why is it almost heresy if you actually believe greater things you shall do?
Because of you have a societal self and you have a spiritual self. And you must decide which one is sacred to you, which one is your source of authority.
Right.
And many people don't understand that, and they go with society. And society, if you have to be a part of society, you need to be conditioned by society, you need to fit in with society, you need to go along with society. When society has been structured under these low vibrating gods who keep in fear and agony and suffering, so you have been told that this is the process, that you need to fit into society. But you've not been told that you have a spiritual self, and that your spiritual self should be your source of authority.
Were you ever told that? Or did you discover that? And did it take the suffering to discover that?
A combination of all those things. Sometimes you'll hear things. In my seeking, I came across different teachings, and I would learn some things, and they really didn't mean much to me, and then I would have the spiritual experience that would follow it, that would confirm those teachings, which was sexuality, one with these gods that come in. And really the ones with the gods, that this spiritual being, this higher spiritual being, that after about 8 deja vu, I went through the different layers of dimensionality to get to this spiritual being, because he was spiritual being, I can't say he, because there was no he or she, no female or male. The spiritual being was just emitting light. And when the light hit me, in that light was the story of this planet, and how things have been turned around. I feel like kind of like the Matrix, Neo in the Matrix, at the end of the movie there, where he opens his eyes and he sees everything in binary code and digits of ones and zeros, and now he sees things for what they are. I don't see things in binary code or digits or ones and zeros, but I see things in vibration, I see things in frequency, and I see something going on. I look at the frequency of that and I say, what is the vibration coming from this situation? Is it a vibration that's feeding these gods, these lower? Because as long as we continue to feed them, we're going to stay a planet of suffering.
Right.
Is this vibration that's going on with them? Is it something? This is how I've learned to. I won't say judge, but we'll say judge for now. Judge the situation. Is this a good vibration, or is this a low vibration that's coming? So there, when you start to see that if it's feeding these malevolent beings, then you understand that this is not what we want. This is not where we want to be. When I moved into other dimensions through the deja vu experience, and I caught up with this higher spiritual being, and they revealed the secrets, what's been going on. I got mad. I got very, very, very mad, and I even slammed my fist down on my desk when I was sitting there in my home, and I said, "Son of a bitch." I said that because I was just angry at what has been going on. I said, they're not going to get away with this anymore. Not that I even knew what I was going to do about it, but I was merged with a higher level of consciousness. My consciousness was at an exalted level. So at that time, my connection with the higher spiritual being ended. And I was writing this book at that time.
It ended because of your anger?
No, just my time ended for whatever reason.
You saw
it just
what you
ended.
needed to see.
I got what I needed to see.
The gavel went down.
The gavel went down, and it was over. And so I said to myself, well, I was writing this book at the time. And I said, somehow this is so profound information. I want to take this information and put it in my book somehow. Because it's really not related to my situation, but then somehow it is because it talks about suffering and what's really going on. So I was just trying to figure out a way to put it into my book. So I sat down and began to read what my initial writings were and how I was going to fit it in there. And I was reading my book. Everything in this book, when I was reading it, was as I was reading blah, blah, blah. Everything in it had no meaning. It was as if nothing in it at all mattered. The drama, the sexual acts, the people involved.
Yeah, I go through those
everything
phases
was
too.
Completely meaningless. And because I had invested so much time in it, I began to cry. And I went outside and sat and vented to my higher order, and I just said, what am I going to do next? I spent so much time. I thought this had real meaning, and now it doesn't mean anything. So I went, and then after I cried a bit, and I went and rested in bed and fell asleep and woke up. And what I now realize, or after that occurred, after I woke up, that while I was reading this book in my transcripts, when I was reading it, I was still existing at a higher level of understanding, just like that ant. If you take the ant, he has a higher level of understanding, you put him back with the other ants, he's going to go down there and go, this thing doesn't mean anything here. All of a sudden, he still has that higher level of understanding. He understands what's really important. And then it's not this ant, this queen ant, it's not this anthill. We're just nothing. We could be smashed out and be gone, and we would not be missed on everything that's really important. So what we do here is not even important.
We could miss everything that's important.
So,
that seems to be the worst.
As I'm having this revelation, I realize that to our higher order, all the things that we find as drama and all the things that we find important are not important to that level of understanding. The things that are important at that level of understanding are love and understanding and peace and caring. These are the things that were important. All this drama and all this stuff, if we look at the ants or we look at the animal kingdom, we don't judge their social structure. We don't judge how they interact with each other. We don't judge their sexual habits. We don't judge. In the same way, our higher order, the gods, our creator, doesn't judge us on how it is that we judge it. We've come to a place where we judge it, and we judge each other, and this is wrong and this is bad, and our laws. But to them, it doesn't matter. They don't care. In the same way, we don't care about how ants interact. In the exact same way. We don't care how they react. They don't care how we interact. But if we find out the ants are getting ready to become extinct, suddenly as a human being, as a higher level of consciousness, we kind of care. We don't want them to become extinct, and we may get involved to help them to prevent becoming extinct. In the same way...
So do you think you had that interaction with that higher being for that?
They're concerned about us becoming extinct. They don't want us to become extinct, but at the same time, if we became extinct, they're just like the ants, we would not be missed in the universe.
Right. So you think it's just... what do you think is the solution? Because you gave a bleak picture about us being in control of evil gods. I mean, some people may not accept your explanation, but they would accept that it's happening. Very bad things are happening.
The only way you're going to get rid of, the only way you're going to go away is if you don't have any way to sustain yourself. You're going to go somewhere where you can sustain yourself. When you begin to understand frequency, and that you have a frequency, and if you can tune into your frequency and tune into the other frequencies and start to raise the vibration of the planet, first of all, raise your own vibration. Then you can start raising the vibration of that around you. And if everyone and then you can connect into the universe and raise the universal vibration even. But until this planet moves into an age of love, a higher vibration, That's the only way these lower vibrating gods are going to get pushed out. The only way they're going to get pushed out is if we move from fear and suffering, starve them out.
Yeah.
They can't sustain themselves unless we continue to vibrate at a low vibration, a vibration of fear, a vibration of greed, a vibration of limited information.
We're in our last minute, Ken, and I want to thank you so much for coming. And you know, we've been blessed by a nice vibration here, and I hope to develop it. I hope to get more of your message out. I hope people buy your book, read it. I hope we post on the internet. I hope YouTube stops censoring me. I hope that the message can go far and wide, that when we communicate deeply, when we take the risk to be as honest as we can, we'll be rewarded. Do you have any last closing comment?
We say 1 minute. I don't have time to read this. I wanted to read this one teaching that came from some stuff I've studied. It comes from the bringers of the dawn of the teachings from the Pleiadians. It said, many of the fears you have are based on what you have created for yourselves and what you've done to others in your sexual life. Your sexual history affects every portion of your soul, and all of your soul's issues are broadcasted loud and clear through your body. You don't want to look at this sometimes because it's too painful, and you judge it because you think it's bad. Stop judging and get neutral about what you've done, no matter what you discover, no matter how heinous it seems, no matter how much violation or how difficult it seems. Just understand that your purpose is to come here and gather data.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken. And thank you. This is Paula Gloria, over and out. To make it not superficial.
It's intention. Intention is key. What is your intention? If you can become angry and still have a good intention, intention is key. Because your intention, when you have a thought, all thoughts are broadcasted. All thoughts are broadcasted, so there is nothing hidden from those who are here to assist us and those who are here for other reasons. So it's very careful that you know what your intentions are.
After a while, you don't honor, what you're saying. Your intention was malevolent. People start to figure that out. That's interesting what you say about all the people, because I agree, you don't put anyone down, and yet some people are still angry because they gave you negative comments on Amazon.
The character Mort
That's okay,
gave me a...
That's okay.
It just proves my point.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
For him to, he doesn't... You have to read the book. Mort went on my Amazon review and gave me a bad review, but that's because he's part of the character in the book. And
yeah, he didn't like the way he was depicted.
I don't think he even read it. I don't think he cares.
Oh, really?
He's just one of these people that just got blinders on. And he just sees things where he wants to see, and he's just mean-spirited. This whole mentality of victimization, that this is another way that we've allowed ourselves to be manipulated. This victimization mentality, it just disempowers, and we have a situation where there's no victim. There's two people no one's being hurt, and then we come in and there's no lower vibration. It's just maybe a good vibration between two people, and then where's the negative vibration come in that sustains these gods? Where do they come in? When we get police involved, and the judge gets involved, the prosecutor, and apprehend, and the society gets involved, and our neighbors get involved, and then we judge, and now we take something that was never negative, and now we make it negative.
Yeah, right.
And so now all this, if you really start to understand this, you start to say, wow, this is what keeps this planet in a mess. These negative vibrations. And if you have a spiritual side to you, it doesn't take much to really start discovering certain things.
Yeah.
And if you subscribe to the understanding that we've been here before and you've had other lives here, if you've been here before, then you've more than likely have been a male and a female, and you've existed in other societies where you married or were married to, where you fell part of one of these other societies where younger and older were married all the time. Even goes on today. Even today, in some countries, it still continues to go on.
No, in the same way.
So you've experienced it. Here you are in your other life experiencing it. Then you come into this life, and then you're punishing it, and you're judging it, and you're shaming it. And people need to start to wake up and go, well, how come in my one life I'm okay with it, and in this life I'm not okay with it? And they need to start looking at that and go, what's wrong here? Why am I feeling this way?
Right. It really makes you broad-minded, doesn't it?
It has to. That's why you have to move past judgment, because you don't know who you were and some of the things you participated in your other lives.
It seems more you judge by the fruits, though. Who's actually helping and who's harming.
That's all. That's exactly right. Fruits. Look at, if you are a good tree, does not bear evil fruit. In the same way, a bad tree only bears evil fruit. And if we start to understand that I am not, nothing I've done is evil. I'm not an evil man. I only bear good fruit.
And you didn't judge Anna for 30 sex partners. It wasn't the sex.
No.
Along the lines of that ant analogy, when we were at Frank Craven's art opening last night, you were saying there's no sexual act that at one time or another in civilization. How did you say that?
This was a study done by the Encyclopedia Britannica, by Paul Gebhardt and the Kinsey studies. And they said that if you could go through the history and the literature, and at some point in time, every possible sex act, child, adult, necrophilia, everything, animal sex act, everything has been at some point in time acceptable social behavior. In the time of Jesus, what we have as recorded, there's marriages going there, and he goes to the marriages, he turns water into wine, he celebrates with them, but at that time, you have a child who's probably 13 or 14, just entering puberty, that's being married to a man, being arranged to be married to a man of wealth, which means he had to be older. And here's Jesus in amongst of this, and here's this child being married to this man, but yet we don't have any recording of him saying this is perverted, this is sick, this is disgusting. Are we saying Jesus is uncivilized?
Yeah, put him on the sex offender
registry. Put him on the registry. Why didn't he saw this young girl being to be married to this older man? Why is there no recording of him protesting to this disgusting, this degrading, this child molestation, this pedophilia? Why did he not say something if it's so bad? No, instead he turned the waters and wine and helped them celebrate. But in that time, the sex offense in that time was adultery, which in Anna, with my book, would be the biggest sex offender in that time, because you could be taken to the outskirts of the city and stoned.
Right.
As far as our society is concerned, if we don't have this shift in consciousness, we say we don't do certain things anymore because we become civilized, but I say when it comes to the hunt for a sex offender, we've reached, as far as being a civilized nation is concerned, we've reached an all-time low.
But you talk about other civilizations. I remember my boyfriend a long time ago. We were in the Transcendental Meditation movement, and that movement had its do's and don'ts. And one area that was a no-no area was UFOs. So Bruce knew that I was a pretty straight-laced TM teacher, and he didn't tell me for 6 months into the relationship about his encounters with his space brothers. That's what he called them. But when he told me, I remembered lying in bed, because it's the only time this has ever happened. Tears were rolling into my ears as he described civilizations where there wasn't war, there wasn't prisons, there wasn't all of these things. I mean, we planned this for 2 or 3 years, and I wanted to plow the ground very carefully and not be misunderstood. That's why I rely on the law and traditions and Mantak Chia, and to say that, this is not unknown, what you're saying, that sexual experiences can lead to exalted development of human consciousness.